I'll just make some general comments about what we're going to do today, and then uh, give you some really good news. So I'll start with the good news. Everybody likes good news. Nobody likes bad news. Okay, so the good news is um, that there has been some discretionary funding, and we have Leah Voorhees, the assistant superintendent, to thank for this, to actually design, in some ways, kind of a career pathway for interpreters. So, and I'll give you more details, but we would do it basically on two levels. And so the first level, and I'm working with Carl from the DLI program, because there's one model that Colorado uses, which I think is interesting. So if you have, adults who are from different backgrounds and know different languages, multiple languages, we actually have someone who was in the army, and he was a translator in Afghanistan. So he knows like about 4 languages. So he has lots of experience in translation. So instead of, hoop jumping for a certificate, he would, and also those who are Spanish speakers and have had experiences in districts with translation, would actually do an oral language interview. We have one that Carl and I are working on, and we have funding for it, so it wouldn't be any cost. And then they would have the basic certificate to provide translation services. And we would try to do it so that there would be opportunities for rural, suburban, and urban districts. But there'd be translators who would be certified at a basic level. And then the second level would be more intense. And we have a community, we'd actually do an RFP for it, where we would train in different languages so that we would have trainers of trainers in that language. Right. So then you would start building the capacity of all your communities to be able to provide translation services. And this is the reason this is important is, and you know this from previously, is the new state law that was passed in 2022 about a language access policy. But of course, it wasn't funded. So I see Dave, Ellie, Shasta, Ross. It's nice to see all of you. Eddie from Iron County. I had a great visit with Iron County recently, which was a great experience. And remember, if you ever want to come with me to use the observation tool and observe classrooms and other areas, you should just email me and we'll look at it, especially in the spring. I think I'm going to be more involved in some rural districts. But Eddie and I had a great experience in Iron County, and saw some really wonderful, actually we saw wonderful science instruction at Cedar High School. Cedar, that doesn't have, all this weird kind of strange pathway where students who people assume can't do the work end up being instantly put into earth science, right? So they don't have any of that, which is amazing, because I went to see this fabulous, I tried to recruit him to come up to Salt Lake. His name is Travis, a great science teacher, and he was doing really hands-on, kind of, they were constructing biomes and ecologies and ecosystems, and it was just a great experience. And then another teacher in a middle school who had the kids so actually engaged in an online program, which is rare, because sometimes online programs are very kind of not imaginative at all. So the point I'm making is that now we have an opportunity to really design a career pathway for all the languages that we actually have in Utah, with a basic certification from USBE and then an advanced one for trainers of trainers, so that we can sustain the work. Part of the problem with having funding generally, as you know, is thinking about how to make it sustainable. And so I think that's the other piece that we're trying to work out. So I'm going to give you an overview of what we're going to do. And I want to start out with a really profound apology for the 24 EL flow-through grant. We end up getting the money, just so you know how complicated this is. We end up getting the money, like the grant from the federal government, on July 1st. After we get that funding, we actually have three other funds that are related to that. One is a percentage for immigrant, which is 5% off the top of 6 million. And the way in which that's organized is it's a very kind of complicated calculation that was approved in 2015 for a significant increase in immigrant students based on the federal definition of students not being in school for 3 years in the United States. Right. So that's how the federal definition for immigrant is. And based on federal law, the minimum is $10,000 for increase, for the percentage of increase. So we take the highest percentage of increase and then look at the districts that qualify, and they get immigrant funding. And of course, it's no surprise that, it's granite, but you probably would be surprised that it's Provo, Jordan, and Canyons, because of the housing issues. So there are more immigrants that are relocating, not in the Salt Lake area, but actually farther south. So that's 5% off the top. Then the other, there's another amount, and it's really a small amount, that's for state activities. And the reason I'm telling you about state activities, it's actually connected to observations. So when I do observations to principals and visit with teachers and interview students, then we did this in Iron County. We actually identified special needs in relationship to curriculum or anything that's supplemental, because remember, this is federal funding, and you can't use federal funding for supplanting what the state obligation is for civil rights. So the things that we're going to be talking about is the use of state funding around innovative projects. Some examples of innovative projects that we'll be talking about is the revitalization of our indigenous languages in Utah. So, of course, we know that Navajo, they have gotten federal grants as well as extra funding to maintain the Navajo revitalization. And this year, and I hope I'm not taking, the thunder from Trevor, they actually had, and we worked with Carl on this in designing a biliteracy seal that was specific for Utah, because the other challenges that Trevor and I found, and Brenda, was that the Navajo Nation, the way in which they were designing the Navajo biliteracy seal ended up being a little bit more challenging in other ways. And so we organized it, and so we end up having, which is really amazing, 12 biliteracy seals in Navajo with Navajo children. So, that's one method of revitalization. And then we have, Stephanie will talk about their efforts in revitalizing Goshute, which is another tribal language. And then Randy, when he comes on, however we do this, he'll be talking about the latest work that we've done. We've done it with Eddie and with Randy and Mike and people in Washington County and Iron County, and meeting with the Paiute leaders, Southern Paiute, which is a dialect. So Northern Paiute is different than Southern Paiute. So the point I'm making is that the way in which funds are allocated is the attempt to maintain Utah's view of the assets that we have with Indigenous families to maintain family languages. And as we know, and Ellie will talk a little bit about this, when we look at the data, the dual language immersion programs in Spanish end up supporting students learning English in achieving their annual growth goals far more than an ELD class. So, and Dave probably can talk about that as well in the work that they've done. So we're going to spend some time, and the apology really is about the way in which grants end up being uploaded. So it ends up being really a complicated process. So we get it in July 1, and then the initial allocation for the flow through is sent out, but it's in the summer, right? And the other thing is that districts and charters that are under the 10,000 mark can join consortiums if they have a fiscal agent. So then we have to work with smaller districts, and some have done this for a long time, like not Summit Academy, but Duchesne and Carbon, Emory, Kanab. And so they've been pretty accustomed to doing this, and we're trying to support the charter schools in creating this collaborative environment. Rebecca Cisneros has been really wonderful from Itineris. She's the one who's done another charter consortium. So innovation is a value in Utah. So when I visit places, and if you want to come with me and see some really amazing things, then we work with people in the district as well as the schools, especially schools that are in TSI for EL, how to better support them. So that's where the state activities funds initially, that's how that ends up happening. It's a way in which promising practices can be disseminated, in a more coherent way. So we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be thinking about the annual self-assessment. So I've tried to simplify the annual self-assessment as the application. So unfortunately, it takes a long time for the funds to get uploaded into the Utah grant system because it has to go through like a series of approvals and then checked and rechecked and then sent down to the financial operations people. And so because Tammy, who was our fiscal manager, has retired because of illness, Marilee is wonderful. We have her. But I think this is the first time that there was some confusion about the deadline, right? I think initially it was put in like October 23rd, and then all of you were emailing me hysterically and saying like, why is this happening? Because I didn't know. And then we got it moved to November 1st. So the reason the annual self-assessment actually is in the ESSA legislation. It talks about an annual kind of report. And the reason it's designed the way it is, so that you could input your evidence for what you're doing, is so that you'll be knowledgeable about federal law, state law, and civil rights law. So it's a way, the application in this self-assessment is a way to get you prepared and to protect yourself, to better understand the actual, obligations that every LEA has. And previously there were assurances and other things. And when anything changes in state law, then I insert it there so that you'll be updated. So there won't be surprises. When families feel like their civil rights are being violated, and this is happening more and more, I think, as you know, and even with teachers who sometimes, don't have kind of equitable access to decision-making processes, mostly in high schools. When they submit OCR complaints, then it ends up being a pretty exhausting experience for LEAs, and so this is an attempt, the annual self-assessment as the application for Title III funding is an attempt to support your understanding of what you'll be held accountable for, right? So that's why it's designed that way. And sometimes you're in the process of developing a policy, and then you just put down that you're in the process of developing a policy. It's not a gotcha kind of thing. It's really about supporting you. So, so that's my apology about the time. And the annual self-assessments that I've seen have been like really amazing. I see Kim from Freedom Prep, and I've asked Esther to talk a little bit about that. And anyone who is, actually finished their self-assessment and I've approved it, I've done personal emails to each each person so that they know it's approved, so they don't have to be anxious about, spending money and reimbursements and all of that. When I first came to this position, I think it was 2015, so it was quite a while ago, Title III would end up sending back between $80,000 and $100,000. And I know that's not much in the scheme of things, but for districts it is when you're trying to use funds effectively. It would be sent back to the Treasury that that weren't expended. And since that time, we've organized a way to remind people about, the deadlines for reimbursements and all of that. And so as long as I've been here, we haven't sent, I think there was one year when we sent some money back, but it was like $4,000. So I just want to thank each of you for your sense of integrity and your commitment and, the work that you're doing for, our students who are really an asset to our learning. So Esther, do you want to say something about your experience with the annual self-assessment? And Kim, you can jump in. Anybody can jump in to really help people understand, how the annual self-assessment is designed to support the work that you're doing. So I'll leave it to you, Esther.
Thank you, Christelle. Yeah, I really appreciated your description of how the self-assessment guides us to make sure that we are aware of new law or new code that has come down the pipeline, because it has functioned that way for us. Towards the bottom of the self-assessment, it has the new code that we need to be in compliance with, like regarding translation services. And so that has been a really good way of keeping that at the front of our minds and making sure that we are implementing that. But a little bit about the self-assessment, I think, Dr. Estrada, you explained that the self-assessment and the application are now basically one and the same. And that has been awesome for us, so that we're really focused on one document. And I think sometimes I'm a little technologically challenged. So we usually take the self-assessment and we put it into a shared Google document so that we can share that across both of our campuses. We have 2 campuses, and we can have all the relevant people kind of look at this together and collaborate on it. We found the self-assessment to be a really powerful moment for self-reflection for our teams. We're all extremely busy. I just have a couple of charter schools, and we're pulled constantly in a lot of different directions and lots of things to do, lots of reports. So the self-assessment for us is a moment to specifically kind of focus on our MLL students, review our data together, especially our reader data, and look at what's working, what is not working, remind ourselves and stay on track with some things that we really feel will make a difference for our students. Like, a big focus for us has been building our relationship with our communities and making sure that our communication is accessible and clear with our families. So being able to reflect back on some of the moves we've made towards that, like using our Blooms app, which I think translates into, I think it's 150 different languages, which, you know, our teachers can communicate directly with our multi-language families. You know, moving towards making sure that we have Spanish speakers in our front offices, and that we continue to hire people who speak multiple languages. That's been great for us. Something that we have considered in doing our self-assessment is utilizing apps that translate meetings, online meetings, directly into Spanish. That is something that we're looking at as well, you know, that we've been talking about in completing that self-assessment. We did struggle a little bit with pulling the data, especially with the timeline, with trying to get the state data from the end of year results. And we actually ended up working directly with the state. Erin Bruff in the Data and Statistics Department was wonderful in helping us extract some of our data from Tableau, which is where kind of that more nitty-gritty data is, rather than Data Gateway. So that was very helpful for us, and he was awesome to help us be able to get the data. We didn't want to just throw random stuff on there. We wanted to make sure that we're intentional and thoughtful and really answering the questions thoroughly and accurately. So that has been great. And I guess that's one thing I would say is, you know, if you're struggling with, you may be new to this or struggling with figuring out the data, generally, you know, the state, they're there to serve and they're there to help as well. So rather than being scared of the state, you know, reaching out and working in partnership has been much, much better for us over the years. So yeah, those are a few things with our experience with the self-assessment. Christelle, is there anything else you would like me to talk about specifically?
No, I'll just repeat because there have been questions in the app.
Okay.
So really, you know, I end up putting like October 31st at 5 p.m. The only reason I put that there is because really the deadline is November 1st, right? So I'm just trying to give you a heads up, and I've actually read and looked at some things. And the goal, and anybody can jump in here, my goal is to help you really be prepared. And the reason the annual self-assessment is the application, there's no other application. There's nothing else. The reason it's done that way is exactly what Esther said. It's this idea of, you know, stopping amidst the work that you're doing and then really reflecting. And if you need data, again, you could say, and people have done this, which is fine, you know, the data from the state is not yet available, and that's fine. The other thing is to do what Esther does, is you just contact Erin Bruff and say, this is what I need, right? So Erin is wonderful. I've worked with him. We've done really powerful work in looking at students who are in ELD classes as opposed to DLI classes, and you know, how literacy in your first language translates to, you know, actual progress in learning English. I mean, that's, you know, what the research has said for about 50 years. So the idea of pulling students out doesn't really help them as much as, you know, really working in a coaching cycle and helping your teachers scaffold kind of academic content in a way that's comprehensible for them. You know, and I saw some amazing push-in programs, and one elementary school that is a DLI Spanish uses this really interesting thing, the way they organize their support. It's called WIN, what I need. And so I actually saw students, and a group of special ed, so very inclusive group of, there were special ed students. There was a little girl from who had just come from Mexico the week before, and the teacher was like amazing. He was a second grade teacher, She had a whole group of like diverse kids, and then there was a push-in paraprofessional who was really wonderful and fluent in Spanish. And she was teaching number line. It was actually the first time. I don't know if you think that to understand the number line is challenging. It actually is for little kids. I mean, it is, right? And so she did the most amazing, like, manipulative organization so that the girl who didn't even speak English could actually was understanding everything about a number line. And so there are all these really great examples of people doing amazing, actually amazing work. And so the more we think about a promising practice to disseminate and upscale and learn from each other, is really important. And so I just want to thank all of you for being, whenever I visit, you're always so welcoming and generous and open-hearted and very kind. And the interviews with the students is just kind of the highlight of my experiences. When I was in Iron County and I was interviewing kids, they actually knew what they were learning that day. They knew why they were learning it. They were a little fuzzy on success analysis. So, in some ways, we tend not to be as clear about what success looks like and what quality work looks like. And then students don't really know how to make their work better. They actually think that because the teacher has attitudes toward them, that's how they get a grade. Right. I mean, they don't really make the connection between the quality of their work, right, and what happens as far as the final assessment. So that's why the annual self-assessment is designed so that in classrooms and with teachers, you can help the teachers understand that the students should be doing self-assessments all the time. The students themselves should be setting goals. The first time I met Esther, and I think you were in comprehensive school improvement or something like that. I met with them. We worked with the teachers. They started setting goals for their teaching, and the kids started setting goals. And that happens at Pacific Heritage too. The school has goals based on data, multiple sets of data, not one set, in all the content areas. The teachers have goals and the student have goals. And it's always about self-assessment. How am I growing? What do I need? Who am I going to ask for help? And I've seen like great examples of this in classrooms like all over the state. So would anyone else like to say anything about the annual self-assessment? Kim, yours was really good too. So if you want to say anything, you can pop in.
I'll just jump in for 1 second. I really appreciated the opportunity that this self-assessment gave us to kind of look at all aspects of our program. Since we started being more intentional about this program, we've created opportunities to ask those questions to ourselves about what we can do better and what our goals are, and to our students. And we're always improving. We have a long ways to go, I think, but this gives us like just the framework to ask ourselves the right questions. And are we hitting this bar? And if we're not, what are we going to do about it? And so that structure is really helpful just to kind of organize the many pieces of learning a language in a school setting. So thanks for the opportunity, and appreciated all your feedback.
Thanks, Kim. So again, I mean, that's kind of the priority. The priority of this group is to actually identify promising practices that actually support the decisions that you make and how you allocate resources, which include energy and time, right? So, I mean, I think that's the piece that's really important. You don't want to spend resources and time and energy in things that aren't working for students, right? That's kind of obvious. But the goal is really, by the self-assessment, is to evaluate program effectiveness and then better understand how to allocate resources, your time and energy, as well as funds, right? So that's an important thing. I see that Uinta is here, and one of the things that happened when I visited Uinta was this is an amazing principal. She knew every single student learning English. She kept track of their data, the Arcadians and other data. And then when we sat down and talked, what she actually discovered around that was the students that had a paraprofessional that had a connection that was a native Spanish speaker and was connected to the families. The kids ended up doing much better and made more growth and progress, right? Because, and so then the resources were used. She was only like part-time or something like that. And then the district, Jaime, was really wonderful. And they ended up, funding the parapro full-time. And so those are the kinds of things that are really, the point is to be intentional in a way to evaluate what really works for students and which students. Is it the students who are in level 1 and then they're not combined with level 1 and level 2, and so the level 2s don't feel a sense of kind of privilege and influence, and so they're not helping the level 1s. When you start isolating into homogeneous groups, you limit the capacity of students to learn from and with each other. So you just have to be careful and intentional. And if you ever have questions, you should just ask me. And all the assessment questions, as we know, Megan couldn't be with us today, but she's the one who does the assessment, and there's all kinds of things that are related to that with WIDA, but embedded in the work you're actually doing is student self-assessment based on the quality of their work and their own growth and the goals that they set, I think are really kind of exemplary practices. So does anybody want to say anything else about the annual self-assessment as the application, just so you remember? Okay, the application is the annual self-assessment, and the purpose of it is to make sure that you're not caught off guard and you have evidence for what federal, state, and civil rights law, is all about. It's a way to help. It's kind of like an embedded professional learning experience, if you want to think about it that way. Does anybody else want to say anything? Okay, at 9:30, we're trying to do all kinds of different things with people, and they have schedules and they've been very generous with their time. At 9:30, we're going to have Kim Fratto joining us. So I see Ellie here, and so Ellie, is it okay if I go to you?
Yep, that'll work. I have to apologize. I ended up doing the Zoom call from home because it was going to be quieter and there's a snowstorm. So if I come in and out, I apologize, but I'll try to go quickly. I think the question, Christelle, was about how we are doing late entry. So students that come from a Spanish speaking country, in our case, because we only have Spanish dual immersion, and how we place those students into our dual immersion program. And I think that's what the question is. Is that right, Christelle?
Yeah, it is. The reason I think this is important is that sometimes what happens at registration, and I won't get into the home language survey and all the confusion around that. I'm not gonna get into that. But when students are screened and they're native Spanish speakers, instantly they don't, and it's a DLI program. The parents don't know anything about the DLI program to help their students maintain their heritage language. And when I do focus groups with parents, most of them have no idea what a biliteracy seal is, and they don't have any idea that their students could actually be in a DLI Spanish program. They just have no idea. And so that's part of why we're dealing with this. And Carl and I are going to work on this this year, and to think, and to help people better understand how native Spanish speakers, and their families can have the opportunity to maintain their heritage language as well as learning English. Because obviously the families want their students to learn English, right? Because that's, access to economic opportunity. but they don't want them to lose their family language. Right. But we're not, there's some kind of confusion about that. And so I've asked Ellie to talk a little bit about, and just so you know, Ellie is from Wasatch School District. That's why she's talking about snowing, because it's raining down here, but it's snowing up there. And there was a great article in the Salt Lake Trib in a study, I think done by Harvard, I can't remember which, about Wasatch being one of the few districts in the entire country that had no COVID loss of learning. So, I mean, that in itself, Wasatch I've worked with them and they're doing amazing work with the ESL competency-based endorsement. And we'll actually have Cash talk a little bit about theirs as well. But this whole idea about who has access to a DLI Spanish program ends up being a real challenge, because the people who end up being in those programs usually are English native speakers, and the people that don't have the access are the native Spanish speakers, which I know doesn't make much sense really to educators who are concerned about, families engaged in maintaining their heritage language. So Ellie, do you just want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Okay, so exactly, that's exactly what we do. We have believed in putting our heritage learners, Spanish speakers, newcomers, however you'd like to describe them, in our program from the very beginning. It was actually why Wasatch wanted dual immersion. So this has been a practice in our district since 2009. It is not new. What we do, and it's also done in Park City, by the way, that's another district that does it. What we do is, and the reason why, just to give you some numbers, Dr. Campbell, my director, did a study for his PhD, and he actually looked at our data. And some of the things that he found was that dual immersion is a more effective placement for multilingual learners than a regular ELD pullout program. And why that's significant is we have national data on that, but we did not have local data from the Utah program. And so we do know that the program is good for our multilingual learners. So we start out in kindergarten and second grade with about over 100 EL students in dual immersion in our elementary schools. Like for instance, kindergarten will have about 100 EL students across 5 elementary schools. By the time those students get to 5th grade, we have about 88% of them are exited. So a lot of them exit in 4th grade, almost all of them exit in 5th grade. We have a small percentage that hang on a little bit longer till about 7th grade. So that's the most important thing. The students in dual immersion have exited at an accelerated rate than previous data that we have in our district. So that's why we do it. Not to mention all the things that Christelle talked about with the importance of maintaining family heritage languages. So how do we do it? First thing that we did was we trained all of our secretaries in every single building to be experts on the public relations piece and explaining the program. So if you walk into any Wasatch school, the secretary can tell you exactly what dual immersion is and can tell you the benefits for all students, not just our Anglo students, but our Spanish speaking students. So that's the first point of contact. And usually the question is not, do you want to be in the lottery? It's, would you like your students to be in this program? Period. And we have the opposite problem that other districts have. A lot of districts have, they have so many students in the lottery and they take them and then their classes are very full. And then when a Spanish speaker shows up at the door in October, because by the way, that's when they come, they have no room in the program. So what we do is kindergarten, we go ahead and we set up our lottery, but we leave spaces for our native Spanish speakers that we know are probably going to come later. So we save, I don't know how many, it depends on the school because some of our schools have more than others. But I can speak to one of our schools. They actually protect about 10 spots in our DLI program. Then everybody comes, and then what they'll do is if they don't fill those 10 spots with Spanish speakers by October, they will take students off the wait list. Okay. So you'll see that sometimes it looks like we have smaller class sizes in kindergarten and first grade, but that's because we know our Spanish speakers are coming. So we go ahead and put them in. The conversation in the front office usually is, we have this program, these are the benefits. We have Spanish language speakers in the front office, and if we don't, we have translated materials. We also have a document in Spanish that explains everything in bullet points. So if there wasn't someone available, they could have that. And then we ask the parent, is this something that you would like your child to participate in?
Hey, Ellie, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Hello, by the way, it's good to see you.
Hi, David.
Hey, my question is this. I guess when they're explaining this to parents, I've heard just too many schools and too many programs say that it's for teaching Spanish, right? Or it's teaching Chinese, or it's teaching French, or it's teaching this. And so then the teacher themselves feel like that they're Spanish teachers, or they're Chinese teachers, or they're this, when really it's about content, right? And I know you're shaking your head because I'm preaching to the choir here, but that's really what the message is. And you have two fantastic teachers, by the way, that went up your way. Say hi to them for me.
Okay, I will. Absolutely. And so our materials actually, so that's one of the things about the state program. The PR materials that are produced by the state oftentimes don't include the benefits and an explanation from the perspective of a Spanish speaker. So we actually prepared materials on top of the state prepared materials to really explain the different perspectives. We also have 2 different parent nights because we actually found that doing a parent, it's just very different. The cultural approach is different. The Anglo parents want a PowerPoint with research, and our Spanish families, we sit down in a circle and we chat and they ask questions, and it's much more informal, but they get the information that they need. So we do have 2 different presentations for that. But yes, they don't say it's a Spanish language program. They say that we are teaching content through both languages, and students have access, for example, to math content in their L1. So when they go to English, it's easier for them to understand the math lesson. And that usually sells the parent right there, because they're like, oh, my child will be so, happy and will be less scared. And so we go ahead and we opt them in. Elementary is fairly easy, everybody, because even if we get a newcomer, so a student that speaks no English in, say, 5th grade, and doesn't have strong literacy skills in Spanish. Okay, we have an assessment we call the dynamic assessment. It tests all 4 modalities. And within literacy, we do look at phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, comprehension. We do not isolate vocabulary, but that comes out in the oral proficiency piece. So we do conduct the test. The point of the test is not to say if this native speaker can go into our elementary program. The point of the test is to see if the student has literacy skills, and if so, at what level. And then thankfully in our district, so this is our context, please take it with a grain of salt. We have interventionists, and we actually have Spanish interventionists. So if a student is placed in the program in 5th grade, let's say, and they don't really have literacy skills, there is a program that has an accelerated phonics Spanish program. It's through the company called Estrellita, and I can send you the information if you want to know. It's not the Estrellita program, but it's one of their other programs. And we, in Spanish intervention, we use that and we get the students to the point where they can read in their L1. Why do we do that? Because we know, according to the meta-analysis that was done, that students who have a stronger L1 will perform better in L2. So we absolutely want to start with their L1 because they already have oral language in that language. So this is our kind of our theoretical approach, and then the practice as a result. In middle school, unfortunately, we do not have as much support with Spanish intervention. So it has been very rare, very rare. When I talked to both my middle school principals, they both told me it's less than 2 students at both of their schools over the past few years that we've been having 2 middle schools, probably like the last 6 years. So only like 2 students have they ever had to say, look, if we put them in DLI in the middle school level, they're reading literature at this level, and we don't have the interventionists to support them. So what they have done in that case is they can give them some time. They have this like intervention time at the middle school. And so they do go to the EL teacher who is bilingual and does help them with L1 literacy, but they don't place them right into that dual immersion class. But that was only 2 students over like the last 6 years. The rest of them, we went ahead and we give them a literacy test. And I have that placement exam that we use. It was actually teacher created. Then we looked at it as a PLC across the district and everybody agreed on it. So we do use a test. We see where they are with their literacy. And then according to that, most of them are no lower than our lowest student in the class. Does that make sense? So when we test them, we don't find, I mean, we found these like 2 kids that had 0 literacy. But generally speaking, our Spanish speaker students are coming and they are able to read and write at some level. This is also an opportunity for us to identify if they might have a learning disability or a delay. And we can also see if it's just a language difference. So those are other important things that we do in that placement. So once we figure out where their literacy level is, they do go into the dual immersion class. And then if they are a little bit behind for whatever reason, interrupted education or, whatever the reason is, then that Spanish teacher will differentiate in the class just as that teacher would normally for any student who is not meeting benchmark. So we don't say no to students just because they're a little behind, and we don't pick students to be in the dual immersion program because they're gonna be the best in the class. We just say, okay, can they be in the class? In high school, thank goodness, it's something we have to work at middle school, but in high school, if they're new and they come and they don't have literacy skills, we have Spanish for Spanish speakers. So they go into Spanish for Spanish speakers, and we have a pathway from Spanish to Spanish speakers where they can end up in either the DLI 5 class or the AP class, and then they can participate in the exam and then join the bridge program, or whatever the goals are, they can reach seal by literacy. So those are all the pathways that Wasatch has and our process for putting students in the program. But we really have a low percentage of students where, and we're working on our services in middle school so we won't have to deny those 2 students the opportunity. But those 2 students, by the way, can enter into Spanish for Spanish speakers at the high school level. So it's only a year or 2 before, but wouldn't it be amazing if we could have some intervention for them so they would have the same access as everyone else? So the dream continues. And David would know that I'm a big dreamer. So I'm going to keep working on that. And that's, if there are any questions, or Christelle, if I missed anything, let me know, but that's kind of what we do.
Yeah, so there were a couple of questions. One, I think, was from Monty from Salt Lake about sharing the data. So Monty, I think you could unmute and then be clear about what you need. But before you do that, I think it goes back to this idea of the systematic way in which front office secretaries and registrars end up determining the academic future of students when they come to the schools. So the fact that, Wasatch has spent really lots of energy in training the front office staff is the first step. That's the first step. I mean, you can't have secretaries looking at students and saying, you have to be screened, even though your home language survey says that, your primary language that you use at home is English. Right. So that's one of the key indicators in relationship to creating a welcoming environment for students and their families. And if you have students, and I visited Wasatch High School and saw the way in which their classes are organized. 20 years ago, when I asked high schools, why don't you have Spanish for native speakers? The response was that, well, that would give them an easy A because they know Spanish. Okay, so that's not really logical. I mean, the question is, if someone is a native Spanish speaker, then how do you develop literacy skills in their home language so that they can actually then attain English faster? If you notice in ESSA, long-term English learners, and that's what the data show, if they're not exited by year 5 or year 6, then the likelihood of them not becoming proficient in English is like nil. And then they don't have any access. Someone is saying they're a native Spanish speaker and they got to be in high school in Spanish. When I was at Pasadena High School and I was the assistant principal, we had Spanish for native speakers, and we had over 200 students in AP Spanish class taking the AP Spanish exams. It was it was a high school of like 3,000 kids. And so the way in which you organize your courses so that a heritage language is honored, particularly Spanish, instead of saying, well, you can't enter because you're not literate in Spanish. Well, I mean, so does that mean that if you're not really effective or literate in English, you can't get into an English class? I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right? So other questions for Ellie. So Stephanie, can you just unmute and ask the question?
Yes. So I thank you for all that information. I love hearing what you guys are doing and how you're building it, building the pathways and this bridge. It's just basically systems of supports that you have in place. We're right there. We're as we've been growing and developing. I love these ideas. I'm just wondering and hoping that you have this like in a visual format or some type of written handbook to kind of help share. And I'm happy to share anything that we have to support any of the processes you have as well, but to help us get going, and so that I'm not recreating this process.
So we do have it kind of like in a document. I mean, I have several documents. I don't have it in like a report or anything like that, but like the flow chart with the pathways, we have that. The materials that we use with our secretaries, we have that. So specifically, if I had a list, I can put my email in the chat, and those of you that want it, or I can just send all of that to Christelle. What is easier, Christelle?
Yeah, why don't you send everything to me and I'll just kind of organize it and we'll send it out to everybody. The other thing, USBE website uploads have been have been very slow, so I apologize for that as well. Because that's the other thing, is the new resources on the homepage is really important. And there are other things about the individual learning plan and models that should be up there too. And so you'll actually have all these, all this available to you on the website. But Ellie, if you would send that to me, and then I'll send it out to everybody on our listserv, which is, I don't know, 300, 400 people. They can use it as they want. We have, and I think that would actually answer maybe Monty's question from Salt Lake about the data that you mentioned. Monty, are you
Which
willing?
data, Monty, because you were
Yeah,
talking about
I was
Campbell?
curious about the data. You said that you studied, one of your professors studied your programs and was saying that DLI was a lot more effective.
Yeah, that's actually Dr. Campbell. He is the director of student services and equity here in Wasatch. I can get I think he has like a PowerPoint of his dissertation that would be a lot quicker to look at than the dissertation.
Thank you. That would be amazing.
Yep, I'll ask him for that.
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. His dissertation is amazing, but I think if he has a PowerPoint around it, it would be really great. We also have a question from Eddie from Iron County. So Eddie. You're muted, Eddie. Eddie, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
All right, my earphones was plugged in. Anyways, thank you for all that information. Yeah, it would be great to have all that information that Ellie has, and then I appreciate all her help to get me going. It's not perfect yet, but I got my classes started for the EL students for the district, for the middle school and high school program. And I'm very grateful for you, for all your help. And I just wanted to, the same as everybody else, the information would be wonderful to be emailed out to us. And also a question, how many of you have internet in Spanish on your district website or anything like that?
So I think we'll go to Veronica. There are other questions in the chat, but if you have a question, it'd be a lot better if you would actually ask it instead of me trying to listen to the conversation and then monitor the chat. I think there's a question from Robin and someone else. So the question Eddie is asking, I think, is an important one. Veronica, do you want to respond?
We as our district is just starting to get rolling on better serving our MLs. We start individually by school sites and just having them translate their website because it is a huge need in our district. However, in talking to IT and working closely with them, we now have everything translated for our district, and every school individually's website is translated, and really all they have to do, we only have it in two languages. We have Portuguese and Spanish, but we're hoping to extend that because we know that the need is much greater than that. And so just at the very top, there's a button that people can hit, and it'll give them those options. And as we develop these family nights that have been gradually increasing by number every year since I've been on board, we make sure that we offer that information so that parents are aware and they don't need to be calling the school just to access some information that they can easily access online, on the internet, on the website itself.
Yeah, Eddie, I think that I think the Title III website, when Michelle Miller was here, she just actually did a Google Translate and it's all in Spanish. So you talk to your IT people, and there are really great examples of most of the districts who have dropped down, and it's in like 100 languages or something like that. So you just let me know how we can help you and support you And I can talk to Steve Burton about the IT services for translation.
That would be wonderful. I'm also over the Title VI program, the Indian Education. And that's going well, but the other one, I'm still trying to learn my way through, so thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Eddie was with me in Iron County and we saw some great instruction. And he's just like, this wonderful human being. And so, it's great to have you on, Eddie. So Robin, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. I'm just wondering, with the Wasatch program, do you also suggest the DLI program for your non-Spanish speakers, or are you looking for other ways to serve them?
So yes and no. We do not close the door if a speaker of another language wants to be in the program. That would be open to them just as it would be to anyone else. So if we have space in the program, but that's up to the beginning of second grade, we typically wouldn't put someone who doesn't speak Spanish in our program after that, because of the resources that we have are limited for the program, basically. But there is research that says that a student who speaks 2 other languages, learning a third language is actually very feasible in the class. So I know I'm thinking of an example in Park City where we had Spanish speakers in the French immersion program, and they did well in that program. I know at least one of them went all the way through. So all the way through to the high school. Sorry, let me finish that thought. So we wouldn't exclude them. I don't know that they have to be included though. It would that would be parent choice. We do, I don't know how to say your first name. Is it Thais?
Yeah.
Thais. Okay. It's a beautiful name. I've never seen it in Spanish. So we do have a newcomers program. So when newcomers come, we have about a 6-week intensive program. Like, for example, in our middle school, we have a specific class every single morning where they are learning survival English and kind of getting their feet under them. And then we release them back. And anyone who speaks any other language that comes to us is in that newcomers strand. We have a similar program in our elementary, but it's facilitated through our tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 process. So that's how we do it. But yes, I have some research on the third language immersion programs. And I just wrote that down to include it in my email to Christelle. So you guys can see, you could do it. It's not harmful to kids. It won't harm them. So they'll just be multilingual. Amazing. How's that?
Ellie, thank you so much. You can send me more questions and I'll and again, if you have a question for Ellie, you should just ask it right now because Kim Fratto is on, and so we're gonna kind of shift gears. So any other questions for Ellie? The other thing I wanted to let you know is that in the application there's the annual self-assessment, but embedded in the Utah system is the budget. You have to actually put the description is there generally from previous times, and then there's a budget. And remember, you can always do revisions of budgets, but the Utah grants always has the budget in there because that's really the point for you to actually, plan what you're doing based on the resources you have. And it can always be revised in the application, just to clarify. Okay. Veronica, do you have a question about that?
I had a question actually for Ellie. I know you
Okay.
said we should just ask it now. Ellie, you talked about how newcomers go through an intensive 6-week program on a daily basis every morning. Did I miss whatever grade level they're at, elementary or secondary?
Great question. Yes, we do the intensive in the morning. That's at our middle schools and our high school. The elementary school, we support newcomers through our tier system, through our RTI system. So they all go to tier 1 instruction, but during tier 3 instruction, that's where we do our newcomer support. And then tier 1, they're getting when we do tier 2, so that's reteaching what was taught in tier 1, we make sure they either, if it's a newcomer, they might receive that reteach in their first language, or they might receive it in English, or they might receive it by, they always receive it by a teacher who is highly trained in multilingual instructional strategies. So that's how we do it in the elementary school.
Thank you.
So there's another question, and it says, how long do newcomers spend each day in this support? And the reason this is important is people keep on asking me, I don't know why they keep on asking me. I think it's because they think it's an OCR or a federal obligation about how many minutes in ELD. Okay, so that's really not the point. I mean, it's not about how many minutes are required in ELD. So Ellie, do you want to say a little bit about the way?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that we do, the first line of support is going to be your tier 1 instruction, making sure that your English teacher has the skills that they need to support that newcomer. So that would be number 1. And then number 2, it's 30 minutes for our tier 3 every single day. So it's 30 minutes every single day, but that is just survival English and support. They're not teaching the content area there, and it is actually a short amount of time. This is not, they don't go to that tier 3 for the whole year. You know, they're going just to get the survival English. And we actually have a kind of I wouldn't say a curriculum, but we have a can-do list. And as soon as the student can do everything on that can-do list, they stop going to that tier 3 support. So really it's our classroom teacher that is doing most of the support. It's just that transition when a newcomer comes and they just don't know anything. We've got to help them a little. So that's how we do it.
So if you could send the can-do list. So I'm just going to say this. So she's going to send everything to me, and Ellie and I will work together and organize it and send it out to you. But here, so I don't know how I can say this other than just being incredibly direct. Pulling out students is ridiculous. It doesn't work. You should be focusing on quality tier 1 instruction. That's the whole point. And it should be this is the only question that we look at when I go visit and that the Department of Ed asked us. How is the state agency going to ensure that students learning English have access to grade level content? This is about grade level content. That's the point. Pulling them out and I'm not going to say where I saw this, having high school students recite 100 words orally back and forth to them is not access to grade level content, right? I mean, so you have to be very committed to creating systems and environments in which everybody understands, including your front office, that every single student has a civil right to actually be successful in grade level content. That's what you just keep saying that over and over and over again. This is not about pullout. This is not about, the kind of interventions that unduly segregate students. Right?
Yeah, but Chriselle, I think the problem comes when you've had a culture that is built on pulling kids out that, you know, we used to think was a fantastic idea. I mean, I've told this group before, our research department did a study on our kids in secondary that were in ELD, not ELD, and then ELD and ESL. And guess which group did the best? The ones that were in neither of those, the ones that had nothing, that were in the classroom with teachers doing their best. I mean, I think for the most part, teachers really do try, but that's the group that saw the most increase. So now what does that tell me and us in Granite District is, hey, we need to look at two things. Either our ELD programs really, really suck and we're not doing what we're supposed to do in there, or it could be that we're the teachers that we're putting in there, because when you have a massive program like this in schools, you got thousands of kids coming in, you're a principal and you're like, gee, who do I get to teach them? It's not what is the best teacher in our school to teach them, right? It's who can I talk into at this point, or I can, you know, buy this to add to their schedule. I mean, that's not everybody, but we are seeing that as a problem in Granite, and it's because the culture was really that way, and we've just got to change it. It takes time, but I just appreciate you coming out and letting people know that it is about access, and we're not doing our job if we're not getting kids access.
Thanks, Dave. You should see Dave and I when we sit down together for lunch, which is still on my calendar for a lunch date. Okay, so we're gonna actually so Shannon, it says everyone, there's a teacher checklist that she's put in there. I'm going to turn it over to Kim. Ellie, thank you. I think we have a few things to do to send out to everybody. But the work that you're doing in Wasatch is, you know, as Harvard has said, and the Salt Lake Tribune and everybody else, not to have a gap in COVID learning, you know, probably one of the only districts in the entire country, you know, is really a great gift and shows the way in which, you know, Eric and you work together. So I just want to thank you for your dedication. Okay, Kim, you're up.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kim Fratto. I am excited that I get to be here today. I work at the Utah State Board of Education as the Director of Special Education Programs. So excited to come talk to you. I get to work closely with Christelle, and we talk frequently as we field lots of questions that come into us about how to support multilingual learners and students with disabilities, and just lots of different questions that we get. So I'm going to share some of those questions with you today, and how they relate to supporting students with who are learning English and or multiple languages, and who also may present with a disability, and how those two work together, and some of the questions that we get regarding do they work together and who's responsible for what, and some of the confusions, I guess, that come with that. And so I'm really passionate about multilingual learners. I've worked in special ed for many years and worked in the area of supporting students who are learning English. And I also, both my daughter-in-laws are from Brazil, and they're both named Carol, and that's a story from another day. They didn't know each other, although they're from the same state in Brazil, different cities. It's an interesting story. So I'm very passionate about students who are learning English, because although I don't have any grandchildren yet, and that's hopefully soon to come, we're looking forward to that one day, I know that my grandchildren will be multilingual learners. So that further drives my passion. And then also working with my daughter-in-laws, Carol 1, that's my first daughter-in-law, and then Carol 2. Carol 1 is she is trilingual and learning her fourth language, which is Italian. My background, my husband is his family's first generation Italian to this country, and they do not speak. Him and his siblings, there were 7 of them at one time, and none of them speak Italian because their parents did not teach them their native language. Because when they came here and that was the language they spoke, they had such a rough time in school. It was very different then. And my mother-in-law was held back in school because of the language. She had a rough time. She was made to think that she, couldn't learn like other students, teachers. It was just rough. You guys have heard all the stories, I'm speaking to the choir. So they didn't learn the language. And when my daughter-in-law met my son, she was so excited that she was going to learn Italian because she was marrying an Italian, and then was sad to learn that he didn't know the language. So she's learning Italian. That will be her 4th language, and hopefully she'll teach it to my son. So a little bit of background about language and culture from our family. But I'm going to get into now what I'm going to talk to you about. So I'm going to share a slideshow. And do I have sharing rights? I think I do. Yes, I do. So I'm going to go ahead and share that. And it says, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Let me get it in slideshow mode so I can get right on my first slide. For whatever reason, it doesn't show me the screen I'm sharing, so I'm hoping. Okay, there it came up. All right, so I did prepare this presentation with Dr. Estrada, and then a friend of mine and colleague, Jordan Dehan, who handles our dispute resolution in our section. So first, I'm going to start with some common questions, and these are common questions that come to us, the top questions. When can I refer a multilanguage learner to special education? What score does a student need to receive on WIDA to rule out special education referral? What language proficiency levels needed for advanced coursework or honors classes? How long must a student be in the country before they can be referred? How likely is a multilanguage learner to have a learning disability? Do I have to assess in their native language? What are the concerns about misidentifying? Do you need to assess in both language? And are we required to serve students in post-high school programs? So we'll hopefully answer those. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware that we have a very robust website at USBE with information that through both special education and Title III that answers, that has resources that answers a lot of these questions. So I put some links in here for you just for your references, and we'll make sure that this slideshow presentation is available for you. All right. So, and just some little statistics for you that students learning English make up 9% of all of our public school students and are enrolled in nearly 3 out of 4 of our public schools. And then again, a link. So some of these, again, slides will just have some information for you that I think will be great resources for you. And so have made those available for you. All right. So important things to know that students with disabilities must be provided both language assistance and disability related services to which they are entitled to under federal law. So both services are entitlement services, disability related services, and English development services are entitlement services, and there is not one service that overrides the other services. So if you are hearing, or if you have heard, oh, you don't need to worry about that in your department, the IEP will take care of that. That is misinformation, friends. I'm here to tell you that is not something that one department takes care of over the other. They're both entitlement services, and as you know, if they're entitlement services, students must receive them. So that means both departments must be working together to ensure that students receive those services. So they can be and should be addressed in the IEP, how those services are going, how they are going to be addressed, and how their language needs will be addressed in the IEP, and how they impact their education and access to their education. And and how their disability also impacts their education and access to their education, and how you're going to work together to address that. So students who have a disability are just they could have language needs and a disability, and that would occur at the rate that it would occur for any other student in the population. So they're just as likely, students who have language needs are just as likely to have a disability as students without language needs. So we need to make sure that we account for that. And to avoid inappropriately identifying students with language needs as students with a disability, that we need to make sure that we are appropriately evaluating them, and we have evaluation methods that are consistent. So one of the top reasons that we do inappropriate evaluations or referrals for students who are learning a different language is because we have inconsistent methods for referral or evaluation for multilanguage learners. So our LEAs, you're in your school and in your LEA, you have to have a consistent referral method and an evaluation system that you have set up for your referral of your students who are learning, who are multilanguage learners. So that's one of the top things, and you need to, you know, follow that process. So and if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and I think Christelle will help me monitor the chat. All right. So we need to also make sure that we are evaluating in their native language and addressing all their language needs. Okay. And then we get questions about, can parents opt out? So if parents decline disability-related services under IDEA and Section 504, the state education agency and the LEA remain obligated to provide appropriate language assistance services. You can, and a parent can if parents opt out of specific EL programs and services but have consented to the provision of disability-related services, the LEA remains obligated to provide those services as required and outlined in the IEP or the Section 504. And they have to conduct the English language proficiency monitoring and provide language assistance. And that you can look at the Chapter 7 of the EL Toolkit for information, and it outlines specific obligations regarding students who opt out of EL programs and services. So you'll want to make sure that you follow that closely, and you're following the guidelines for when parents opt out, because there are still requirements that must be followed in order to ensure that students receive what they're entitled to and the requirements under these programs, because they are entitlement programs, and students with disabilities still have to receive what's considered a free appropriate public education. And then if the parents completely opt out, then there's forms and things that need to be signed if they're opting out of disability related services. Okay, so looking at federal and state and local policies. So Title III permits parents to opt out of services, but does not allow opt-out provisions for the annual English language proficiency assessment. And of course, we use the WIDA access. State WIDA access has been removed from the parental exclusion form, and that was approved by our board in May of 2020. And then we want you to make sure that you're familiar with your LEA policies and procedures for providing your language development services. Every LEA has to have policies and procedures that are outlined around providing those services. And some of this stuff you guys are very familiar with, but one of the things that I want you to know about this presentation is because we have had so much confusion back and forth between both our special education departments on what, well, special ed will just handle this. We don't need to look at our English language development programs, and we'll tell them that special ed will handle this. And we know that special ed can't take over for English language development, and English language development can't take over for special ed. We are making sure that this presentation is presented to both departments, and so the same presentation that I'm presenting here, I presented to our directors of special education so that they get the same information, so that we're giving consistent information, so that hopefully when you have these discussions back in your LEA, the discussions, they'll have received the same information that you're getting here, and they'll understand that IEP teams can't come in and say, oh, we'll handle that. The English language development department doesn't need to be involved in this because the IEP will take care of all these services. So hopefully that is some helpful information for you to know. Under special ed, we have a child fine provision, and under that child fine provision, there's an obligation for an LEA to locate, identify, and evaluate a student who may be suspected of having a disability. That is a requirement under the law. And so under that child fine provision, that includes identifying students who may have a disability who also are English language or multi-language learners, and also addressing their needs. And the child fine evaluations cannot be delayed based on a student that is learning English, based on their status as a student learning English, based on the amount of time that they might have been in the country, based on the amount of time that they might have been in school learning English, and they still have to be located, identified, and that's part of the child fine obligation. If a parent refuses disability-related services, they are still entitled to language services. And that is in the law. And then the OSEP, Office of Special Education Programs, came out with a Dear Colleague letter in January 7th of 2015. And I always describe these Dear Colleague letters as when OSEP puts something, when something is in the law, and then OSEP comes out with our Dear Colleague letters, these letters come out, and that's when OSEP says, in case you didn't understand what's in the law, because sometimes it's technical, we write a letter to say this is what we meant, just in case you didn't understand. You still have to address all these things. You have to locate and identify these students. You have to address their language needs. And if they refuse disability-related services, language needs still need to be addressed through the appropriate channels. Okay. All right. Accessibility and accommodations. So USBE has accessibility and accommodations manual, and there's the site there, the link to it. And I just highlighted some areas in the manual that would be of particular help. Accommodations are starting on page 14. Specific circumstances start on page 25. That would be very helpful. Alternate access decision tree for students who have disabilities or more complex disabilities start on page 26. That's very helpful to look at that alternate access, because we get lots of questions around students who that you're not sure how they would access the WIDA. Can they take it? Should we be administering it? That decision tree is very helpful, and the domain exception tree on page 29 is also very helpful. I would encourage you to look at that, because they still need to be administered, these assessments, if they have a disability. Yes.
Kim, we have a question for Ellie, from Ellie Gallagher. So Ellie, do you want to just unmute and ask the question?
Sure. I'm just wondering, for students with limited or interrupted education, how that is addressed through this process. If, you know, I'm assuming that the EL department needs to communicate with SPED when they're doing this process, but how is it articulated so that actually happens? Because I think what we see sometimes is a student with interrupted education is recommended for SPED testing when really they just did go to school for a couple of years.
That's a really good question, Ellie. And that is one of the things that we that is considered one of the rule outs in special education. So that's one of the things that in a referral, the IEP team or sometimes they'll have TAT teams, or you call them different things in your respective LEAs, teacher assistant teams, and they look at if there was education that was interrupted. That's something that the referral team needs to consider. Is this a disability, or is it due to the education being interrupted? So some of the things that we look at as rollouts, is this a language issue? Not understanding the language, because you don't want to refer a student for a disability if it's a language issue or a language difference. Is it interrupted education? That could be a rollout. Have they not had the opportunity to learn? So that is one of the rollouts. And so the team looks at that data and says, okay, so if it is those things, if it is related to some of those things, and we can't confidently determine that that it's a disability and it could be these things, then we can say, you know what, even though they're scoring low on some of these other things, we think it could be related to these things and it's not a disability. And then the team could make a determination that this is not a disability, and therefore the student does not qualify under IDEA as a student with a disability. So those should be things that the team should consider, because when determining if a student has a disability, the data that the team looks at is based on a comprehensive evaluation. It's not just the standardized testing. It's comprehensive in nature. It's they'll oftentimes we'll have IQ testing, and we have standardized testing, and we have formative assessment. We have formal observation, informal, formal. We have observation, and then all this other stuff like how long have they been in school, language assessments, all those types of things. And then it comes together, and then we look at those rollouts. And the rollouts are education that's interrupted, language differences, things like that. So if there's strong data in there about language differences and interrupted education, those would be rollouts that should be considered.
So Ellie, is that okay? She says thanks.
Yeah.
We have another question from Ogden, from Thais. Thais, could you just unmute yourself and just ask the questions? Okay, so Thais is saying, are monitor students supposed to be treated the same way for referrals as active EL students? And what types of specific native testing should be conducted during testing? And are there state resources for less common native
Okay, so I'm going to take them piece by piece. So yes, monitoring students. So if you suspect disability, then under child find, if a disability is suspected under child find, then a student should be referred. And then those rollouts are the areas that should come into play. So there isn't anything in the law that says a student should be in the country or in school when I say in school, like in a school in the United States for a certain amount of time before they're referred for special education. There are things that we look at for interrupted school or that say, have they had an opportunity to have instruction? Because if they haven't had instruction, then we want to give kids an opportunity to have instruction, because if they haven't been in school, we wouldn't assume that they have a disability just because they haven't had any opportunities to learn. We would want to give them opportunities to have instruction and see if they can learn, and then then give them opportunities to catch up and remediate that learning. But we wouldn't assume, oh, they have a disability just because they're just behind, right? They would be behind. So we would look at that, but there isn't anything in the law that says, oh, they have to be in school or in an English school in the United States for X amount of time before they can refer. If you suspect disability, then teams can and should make a referral, because there could be other things that are going on. Now, can you take me to the next part of the question? Christelle, read the second part.
And we also have, Robin just put a resource in there that I think is valuable. And the reason and Thais is apologizing because her mic isn't working.
Oh, that's
Hey, Estrella, can you hear me?
Yes. Who is this?
Sorry, Crystal. It's Thais. I'm using Jasmine's. We're in the same room.
Okay.
So my question isn't necessarily kind of what you discussed, is that when we're doing, we have the exit criteria for when you're active EL student versus monitored for 4 years. So do we need to be treating those monitor students in the exact same way we treat active EL students? We have a lot of conversations in our district where we talk about, naturally best practice is to have discussions about language and cultural needs, and we do that. But in terms of that consistency and the protocols and things like that, should we be treating those two groupings of classifications the same way? That's kind of more my question. Does that make sense?
Yes, if you suspect disability, it should be treated the same way. If you suspect disability, then you should refer a student. Anytime a disability is suspected under the LEH child find obligation, you should investigate that.
So the reason this is important, so I'll give you another example. I don't know if Bev is on here, but we'll wait. So from Canyons, their special ed department and their federal programs EL department, they're working together in a very, very, very clear and collaborative way. And so we'll have the benefit of their experiences in kind of mitigating the gap between these kinds of things that Kim Fratto and I hear all the time. Oh, you know, the IEP will take care of the English language development goal. No, you can't. I mean, no. And then the other thing is that we often hear is, well, they haven't been in the country long enough and they're not proficient in English, so we're not going to assess them for special needs. Okay, no. So what Kim and I have been trying to do, and we've been, I don't know how many years we've been trying to do this, Kim. I don't know, 5 or 6 years. We're actually trying to find examples in districts of places where those two departments work so well together that we actually have a model and an approach that we can share with you. And I think Canyons is working on that. I mean, it's obviously it's challenging for lots of reasons because of the law, but I think it's important. So Kim, do you want to go on?
Yes. So, meaningful communication. So communication to parents must be clear and in the language they understand. So parents are entitled to meaningful communication in a language they can understand, such as through translated materials or language interpreter. And you must give adequate notice of information about any program, service, or activity that is called to their attention. And this is really, really important. And I think that this is one of the things that sometimes that we overlook, and that we're making assumptions that the parents understand what's happening with all the programming that's going on with their children. And I'm telling you, I get calls, and when we get complaints and when we get going into investigation and talking to the parents, they don't understand the depths of what's going on in the programming and the programs that their students are involved in. So that we are doing a good job at helping to have translation services at meetings and different things like this. They don't really understand about the programs that their children are involved in. So I would really encourage teams to really make sure that when you're talking to parents about the programs and what's happening, that you unpack that a little bit deeper so that parents understand what supports that their students need in these programs. All right, and then the access letter to parents. It's a really good example of the required annual parent notification, and WIDA has made the letter available in 47 languages. And we have an example here that we've included, and the parent handouts are also available in multiple languages. It's the what is access for ELLs, understanding your child's score, and understanding your child's score for the alternate access. And so I really encourage you, if you're not using these tools, that your teams really dig in and use these tools, because this is a resource that's out there and it's available for you to help unpack some of this so that parents understand to some of those deeper levels. And this is one of the things that we find parents, when they talk to us, they don't really understand what's going on. And the communication can really help with some of the complaints that we get. So this is just to give you some of the resources. Every one of this, click this, it's a hot link, click these pictures, it's a hot link, and then these down below are hot links for you. And it will take you into there. And then here's just an example of, it's very simple letter, and it's available in 47 languages. All right. Every district is required by state law to have a board approved language access policy. And here is a link to a USBE model language access policy. I am surprised when I talk with teams, and the reason I say this is I'm just really surprised when I talk with art, because I talk with a lot of special ed teams. They don't even know that there's a model language policy. So it would be really good if the teams could work together, if your team could work with a special ed team, so they understand that there's a model language policy, and the teams could work together, because special ed teams don't know about this. And so a lot of times when I tell the teams and they're like, oh, and I'll say, well, have you included, they'll call me and ask me questions about testing and things that they need to do for English language learners, and they're like, well, we're going to do this, and we think this is referral. And I'm like, have you involved your English language development team? Have you involved who's on the team? And like, have you referred to your model language policy? And they're like, huh? And so I'm surprised about that. So I would really encourage maybe some, like, I don't know, even monthly would be fantastic, but I know how busy school that you guys all are at your LEAs, but even some quarterly meetings between the two departments, and maybe reviewing some of these things and talking about like how you could work together so that when these referrals come up and the questions come up, so that we could better serve our students who have disabilities and our multilanguage learners. All right. So this is a part that Jordan created for us, and he's not here to help with this part of the presentation, but Jordan Dehan oversees our dispute resolution in special education when we get complaints. And we have a whole department for that. So y'all know we get complaints. So, and I'm just going to go over some things that are really important to, that are key to this, that I think are important for you guys to hear and understand as well. So, with respect to native language and what this means in our world of special education, and this might help mitigate some of the issues and for you to see this side. So with respect to native language, when we're talking about that, that's the language normally used by that individual, okay? In the case of a student who's not an adult, and this comes from rule, the language normally used by the parent of the student in all direct contact with the student, including evaluation of the student, okay? So even if we think the student speaks English most of the time at school and with their peers, that is not the language that they're speaking with their parent. That is not what the native language is, okay? That's not what we're talking about. And we know that, right? But like, we hear this a lot from the teachers. Well, they speak English all the time. They speak it with their peers. That's really the language. So that's what we're going to test in. That's really what they understand. So the language normally used by the student in the home or learning environment. For an individual with deafness or blindness, or for an individual with no written language, the mode of communication is that normally used by the individual: sign language, braille communication, or oral communication. And for students with more complex disabilities, that could be their PEC system, their picture exchange communication, or the communication that they're using on their communication device. Okay. Assessments and evaluations being provided in students' native language. So each LEA must ensure, and notice how he's highlighted, must ensure, okay, that assessments and other evaluation materials used to assess a student are provided and administered in the student's native language or other mode of communication. And we say other mode because our students with disabilities have many modes of communication that they use, and in a form most likely to yield accurate information, and I'm reading this verbatim for a reason, on what the student knows and can do academically, developmentally, and functionally, unless it is clearly not feasible to provide or administer. Now this part, unless it is clearly not feasible to provide or administer, has been left up to interpretation, and it's been broadly interpreted to mean we just can't do that. We don't know how to do that. We don't have time to do that. Friends, that is not what that means. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit what that means. Jordan's kind of unpacked that a little bit. So as a threshold matter, assess the student's proficiency in both English and their native language in order to determine in which language the eligibility evaluation should be conducted. And so he's put this in here. Additionally, the Civil Rights Act requires districts to provide equal education opportunity to national origin minority students who are deficient in English language skills. For English learner students with disabilities who may qualify for special education related services, equal education opportunity includes an evaluation for IDE eligibility that measures students' disability related deficits and needs, not their English speaking ability. Right? We're looking at if they have a disability, not their ability to speak English.
So Ellie, can you actually unmute and say what you put in the chat?
Sorry, I have so many questions, but I think it's so cool that you're presenting to this group.
Thank you.
Yeah. So because in dual language immersion, we have a whole field of study about this. So basically, you know, as you know, in the new linguistic studies, we know about translanguaging. And so if we have that capability of, you know, because this says in English and their native language, and the way that that comes across, it sounds separate. And what we often will see is that a student might answer a question and might translanguage, might use both of their languages. So I guess my question is that okay if that's included in our LEA policy, that we allow that?
I haven't seen anything in the rules that would say that that is prohibited. As long as that is something that you're doing consistently in your policy. I mean, if you have it in your policy and you're applying it consistently. So I haven't seen anything where that says that it's prohibited. If you're doing it, it's in your policy and you have justification for why you're doing it, then I wouldn't think that it would be something that you couldn't do.
Thanks.
Good question. And if I ever heard something different, I would make sure that I would put that out there. But that is, yeah, and I see that a lot, like in my own personal. I'm learning a lot with my Carols. Okay. All right. So determination of eligibility. Again, talked briefly about this earlier. A student must not be determined to be a student with a disability if the determinant factor for your decision is that the student has limited English proficiency, right? Because again, we're looking for, do they have a disability, not do they not speak our language?
Yeah, and also that just to let everybody know, the slides and all the materials will be sent to you. So this will be sent. And if you have confusion about anything in the slides, you know, Kim and I work really closely together, and so asking Kim would be really great. Okay, thanks,
Okay.
Kim.
And then this part, unless it is clearly not feasible to do so. Clearly not feasible is a high standard, and that's what Jordan wanted us to make sure. So there are hundreds and hundreds of languages listed for interpretation and translation services through various contractors. And what he talked about when he did this part of the presentation, I'm sorry he's not here to do it because he's such a great presenter. But he said, work with your LEA and your purchasing department to plan for translation services before you need them. And that's what he does for us at the USBE for when we need translation services for what he does for dispute resolution. So he has worked with our purchasing department to make sure he knows where to go to get them if we have to have things translated so that they're available when we need them. So it's not like, oh, all of a sudden we need him, he doesn't know where to go. It's like when someone requests them, he knows where to go and he has them. So he's like, get it set up so that you have a service that you're going to, so that when you need translation services, they are available within your LEA. Because under the law, the LEA is required to be able to provide them. And you don't want to be caught with like, oh, I need them and I don't know where to get them. It's it's a requirement under the law that the LEAs be able to provide them. So he's like, ahead of time, be ready to provide them because we know that we're required to do that. So that's his tip.
So is it good to add on the last slide Jordan's information too, or?
Yep, I have his
Okay, great.
information. There's Tracy Gooley's our accountability specialist for WIDA assessment. Christelle, there's your information. There's mine and there's Jordan's. Any questions for me before?
So I love this because you know, I don't know why we never thought of this before.
I don't know.
We've been struggling for like the six years.
I know we just answer all the questions and we just keep sending out the emails.
Yeah, and so this is a, you know, a more consistent way for special ed to work with EL and for, you know, using examples of districts that do that really well and then sharing those resources. I actually consider this meeting like a statewide professional learning community where we're learning, you know, from each other and with each other. So Kim, thank you so much.
You bet. And I'm happy to answer questions, and we're just really wanting to help in the field and make sure this is consistent so we can really support our students. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. Thanks.
Hey, Dr. Estrada, can I ask one question from
Yes, Stephanie.
the school district? I have Christiana Allen here, and she's been helping our district move towards ML and dual serve ML SPED supports for our students and training. And she has a question that we have a big question within our district.
We're having several situations where we're having students coming to us that are speaking kind of not so common languages. We have one right now that's Russian. She has a suspected disability, but because she's brand new to the country, they're hesitant to do any kind of testing because we don't have anybody who speaks Russian to then be qualified to administer that testing, nor do we have a test that we can give her, right? So we've got the English tests, but they aren't normed for translation. And we've got psychologists, but they don't speak Russian, nor are they qualified to give a Russian test. So what do we do in situations like this? It's not feasible, to do the testing. We do have a language service that we contract with, but they would be like over the phone. And once again, they're not a psychologist trained to do the testing. So in these situations, what is our best route to get the students the services they're entitled to?
So your translation services that you contract with, there's none that they could send somebody out that speaks Russian that could come out to the school?
No, it's all
we utilize Propio. That's currently our contracted language servicer, but
even if they could, if we had someone who could come out to the school, would we not need somebody certified to give the test and have a test available for them to give? So we couldn't just pick up any old test or.
No, but the psychologist could do a nonverbal there's some nonverbal assessments that the psychologist could do to help do some screeners to see if there's more assessments that they could do. And it's not just the there's some observations. Is there any, how old is the student?
The student is 9 years old.
Yeah, 3rd grade.
Did the student have, and are there any records that you could get from the student's education?
No, they fled Russia with, the clothes on their back.
Uh-huh. Have you done a home language survey and a home interview?
Yes.
Okay, so
also has cerebral palsy.
All right. So you can call me and I can walk through that. I would suggest you call me.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And I'll walk through that with you and give you some more guidance on that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the individual issues are good to be directly connected to Kim and not in the kind of larger context.
Yeah, call me.
So do you want to stop sharing your screen?
There we go.
Okay, great. Kim, you're wonderful. Thank you so much. I love Kim. We just have spent some really interesting years together, and she's just a great yeah, great trusted colleague and very open to helping people. So thanks, Kim. I know you have to travel on and we just have a few more things to do. So again, Kim, thank you so much. Okay, so what we're going to do now, and I'm not giving you a break because we actually have a few things to do that I think are really interesting. And I don't know if Melinda from Cash is here. Oh, there she is. So Melinda is just going to share some of her, this is their first year of doing the ESL competency-based endorsement. She's just going to, just share a little bit about that experience. And then we're going to have Randy from Washington County talk about how Southern Paiute is now focused on revitalization, and Stephanie on Go Shoot, and then Trevor and Brenda on Navajo. So Melinda, do you want to tell us about your experience with your competency-based ESL endorsement, which I'm really encouraging everybody on this this site and in our meetings to really contact me. And we have lots of models and standards and relationships with people who are doing the competency-based ESL endorsement and are doing amazing things. So Melinda.
Good. Well, thanks for the opportunity. I got a little excited and made a presentation. Is that okay if I share my screen?
Sure.
Okay. And if I get talking too much, Christelle, you can tell me to end it. But I did have some pretty neat things that I just thought you might want to see. So, hold up, sorry. I know. Okay, so we were excited to put together an endorsement to increase capacity in our teachers and to help better meet the needs of our students in being able to access content instruction. Our focus is on, here's some of the aspects of our endorsement. We focus on the TESOL standards. We focus on good strategies for instruction. We have monthly classes and Canvas coursework. The participants keep reflection journals. We have ELL coaching cycles with district personnel. We provide some observations and feedback, which has been really positive. The participants do some student case studies, and I want to share a little bit about our shadowing experience we did for our district with these participants, and then we also have a capstone project at the end. So our modules are basically an introduction, the TESOL standards, and the capstone. And each of our modules are about 6 to 8 weeks. So we just finished our first cohort and we started our second one. This is the text that we ask our participants to use, not that we're using the whole book, but we found some great strategies in there and are using several of the chapters. Some of those SIOP strategies we talk about are writing content and language objectives, using scaffolding and visual supports, adapting content, building background, that emphasis on vocabulary, comprehensible input, which is always good, learning strategies, and of course, gradual release, and using those supports such as graphic organizers, note-taking strategies, and addressing the higher order thinking. So all of those strategies are addressed in our course. And then throughout the Canvas course, the purpose of those assignments are to provide them with some information so they would study, and then they would apply what they learned and reflect in their response journals. So we have several articles, blogs, and websites, many of which I used from other districts who have shared with us, mostly Murray. Thank you, Murray. And also, Christelle, we used some of the things that you had in your previous course endorsement. For the endorsement. Some videos are in there. We have them read some of the chapters out of that text. One of the assignments we had that was a favorite is that we had a list of professional texts for them to choose as part of that TESOL standard for professionalism towards the end, and they got to choose a text and a novel, and they really enjoyed having some choice in that and sharing that with everyone. So we all had a new library of things that we needed to buy, because we have so much room on our shelves for those kind of things. Also, we're sending our participants to the WIDA portal for some training, and we have elevation. So some of those modules align really well with our TESOL standards. We have them, you can see the names of these modules here with cultural identity. So of course, when we're working on the sociocultural aspects of students, and then assessment and learning about language and introduction to newcomers. So the elevation modules have been integrated as part of our endorsement process, which has been a great tool for us. As far as the coaching cycles, we started with the Title III observation form, which Christelle has shared before. So thank you, Christelle. And we use that when we go to do our coaching cycles. We've adapted it a little bit, but for the most part, it gave us plenty of feedback and things to use with those teachers to build capacity. We just set goals with those participants, and we just have a few observations each trimester. I was surprised at the end, some of the feedback was, I wish we had more observations, when in the beginning they're a little hesitant, but by the end they were asking us to come back. I sometimes think teachers don't get enough feedback, and once they start getting it, they crave more. That's kind of what we found. As far as the case studies, it's been really interesting to see how they are digging in and getting to know students, and how valuable they're finding that. They participate in throughout the different modules, diving into different aspects of these same students throughout the year. So I just provided a few links if you wanted to see some examples. These, of course, are not real names or pictures that match the student. So here's just an example of a little profile. You can tell that the participant has interviewed the student, some interesting facts about the student, and a little bit of data. Another participant, when we got to looking at assessment, provided a really nice profile. Of course, the student's name is not really squeaky, but you can see some interesting data. There's the WIDA, the blue was the first year, and then the growth with the red, which was really exciting to see at the end of the year. And then the growth and upcoming needs, what would benefit this student, evaluating some data, looking at RISE testing. And it was good to see these student profiles so in depth with what these student needs are. So with everyone that I read, I said, make sure next year's group of teachers has this information, because it was just so valuable to meeting students' needs, and it was exciting to see that. As far as the shadowing experience, we decided to take full advantage of the fact that we had these participants, and we made a little plan for them to do some shadowing. I'm just going to go through this quickly with what we found out. So we had 15 participants, and we decided to target 3rd through 10th graders at a certain level. And we wanted to get snapshots of language throughout the day. We wanted to know what kind of language is happening in our school. And we happened to pick schools that may be on TSI for lack of EL language growth. And so we wanted to see what was happening, how we could support these schools with some feedback. And we ended up with over 1,000-minute snapshots across multiple schools. Here's the form that we used. So at every minute interval, and you'll notice the reference at the bottom, this was modified by Beth Skelton, and her information is there to use. But every minute we were just glancing up at that student, taking some notes, and we were making some codes here. What were they speaking, reading, writing, or listening? And was it social or academic? What kind of reading was it? Were they having supports with the writing? Was it independent? Listening, was it social or academic? And was it with students or teachers? So all of these kind of codes were taken into place. And we found, yes?
Melinda, can you make sure that you share these documents with me, because people are
Absolutely.
asking?
Yeah, I can share that with you.
Okay,
So
great. Thanks.
what we found was, I don't think surprising to any of you, but that we saw the listening domain was what was happening in the classroom most of the time. The students are listening. And then just to show that correlational data, I pulled up our listening levels. I used elevation for this graph, that our current EL's listening skills are strong. Well, they get the most practice with that, so they should be pretty strong. And there was a correlation there to share. And then we're looking at speaking skills. We didn't have as many fives or sixes, a chunk right there in the middle with the 3s and 4s. So this was nice to present to the principals and to the other staff about how can we increase opportunities to speak, read, and write in the classroom. It breaks it down a little more where we're looking at what kind of speaking is happening, academic or social, who is doing the bulk of the speaking. And most of the time, the students were speaking to the teacher instead of speaking to peers. So this breakdown for speaking, the MO, it would be the missed opportunity. So they were given the opportunity to share and they opted out of that. There's the word phrase level, the complete sentences level, and extended discourse. We were actually pretty excited to see them using complete sentences because we had focused on that. Like, you need to have your students respond in complete sentences, model that when they're, using some language frames. And we did see that. What we didn't see, and that we were able to derive from this, is giving the students opportunities for extended discourse. And that's where we're moving to next. So that was a good opportunity to share with them. How can we increase opportunities for students to participate in extended academic discussions with their peers? As far as reading, there was a lot more independent reading than teacher reading. And same with the writing. We didn't see enough frames for writing to support those students with those scaffolds. And there's our listening. Were they listening to peers or teachers more? And we still are concerned with the missed opportunities as well. So when we're looking at when students are opting out of those language opportunities, how can we increase their participation and engagement with language? That was one of the things we talked about. One of my favorite things was to take it back to the participants to say, okay, now we've done all this shadowing. What suggestions do you have for these teachers in school? So it's not just coming from the district, it's coming from, here's what the observers had to suggest. And there's some great suggestions here. And I loved it because then I'm seeing our participants learning and giving some good feedback to our schools. And then we provided, okay, when we come in, here's some look fors from us. And of course, we don't want it to be too big. So there's our big 4. Okay, 5. And we have some resources that we used here, some texts that were recommended to the admins to help with their schools. And that is where I'm going to stop with that particular shadowing one. And I'll go back to this briefly just to wrap it up. I love that shadowing experience. And then at the end, we had the participants do a capstone where they shared evidence for meeting each of those standards. They presented their case studies and we were able to ask them questions, just a small panel. Here's some quotes, which I thought were great just from the participants in the class, the things they appreciated, the presentations, the classes, and the last one I liked the best. It was a journey where each class and assignment served an important purpose in helping me better serve MLs. And that is our endorsement overview.
So Melinda, thank you so much. I think one of the things that you've added to, the competency-based ESL endorsement, which actually, I don't know if you know, but I have a really good friend, Linda Darling Hammond, who is the president of the California State Board. And so she just ended up getting an award. And so I texted her appreciation and mentioned that, Utah is on the forefront of doing competency-based ESL endorsements. And so I sent her a video. I think it was, might have been of Monticello and Tooele, but she's really interested in the way in which that happens statewide in California. So I just want to thank you for the addition of, especially the shadowing and the data that you've used in the way in which feedback is given from participants who now their practice is changed based on case studies. So the work that you're doing is really, really cool. Kudos to you and to the work that you've done and your commitment. Does anybody have any questions before we go on? This is just so exciting. I mean, I think you all don't even have the slightest idea how the designs for the ESL competency-based endorsement at a statewide level, based on the resources and the talents that you have in every district and every charter, is making like a huge difference in the way in which professional learning happens throughout the country. So I just want to thank you so much.
Oh, I love it. I'm happy to share because it's been such a positive result to see these teachers gain these skills and be excited to work with these MLs.
Melinda, this is Ellie Gallagher. I love that shadowing component. We don't have that in our program. So it's so cool to see like something start from like a little baby and then all the districts add to it and create more. So I would love to know like a little more about the logistics of that. Like, did you get them subs? Did you do it one day? How many days did you do it?
Yeah, we did it. We did half-day subs for each participant, and we did a few days so that we could also attend with them. So if we did it all in one day, there weren't enough of us to spread out among the schools. So for us, it was about 4 different days, but the teachers themselves just took a half-day sub and we covered that. And they got a good 2-3 hours in of some data, which was really awesome, which was about 5 students that they shadowed for 20 to 30 minutes.
How many people, this is Rhonda from Ogden School District. How many people in the district were with you?
We have a very small team. So it's myself and our director, Paula Hull, and we had our equity director with us, Alden Jack, and our secondary EL specialist, Emmy Staker. And we didn't go to every school. We usually we're at 4 schools, and there was one of us with a pocket of 3 or 4 teachers at a time.
Thank you. And how many people were did the observations?
All 15 participants.
But who observed them? How many people were observing them? Just you? Are you the only one who observed all 15 teachers?
Are you talking about the shadowing or about
no,
coaching cycles?
Coaching cycles. How many people were helping the coaching cycles?
Okay, not enough. So it was just actually Emmy and I last year, and one of our happy points is that now we've built capacity in those participants, and this year we've turned around and now we have 2 more coaches because now there's 4 of us, and so we've added those additional participants now they're helping us with grading assignments and going out and doing observations and coaching cycles. So
are they still teaching besides doing that?
Yes,
okay,
so they
you.
will get we'll cover their subs to go do observations, and then they are paid an hourly rate for helping with assignments. But we each only have 4 participants now, and that's very manageable. So once you start, that's what we're hoping, is that this can grow and that we're able to grow the program with building capacity with those teachers.
So,
thank you very much.
Yeah, Ron, I just want to tell you, and also Ellie, if you'd say you're doing the same thing, right? So both Melinda and Ellie are doing similar things in building their own capacity with the people who've gone through the program, right? I mean, that's the way you build capacity, because they're really motivated and they're all jazzed and they've done the capstone and they're knowledgeable. So Ellie, just say a little bit about how you are building that capacity.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing Melinda's doing because we just need more people. One lesson that we learned was when we started, we tried to use just some of our coaches or staff that was trained with an ESL endorsement. And what we found was that wasn't enough. We really need to have people who have gone through the ML program doing the coaching. So that's one thing that we're kind of trying to shift toward, that everyone has to go through the program to coach in the program. And then the piece, Melinda, that we ended up adding on that you might want to think about too, is just I have a little support group for the coaches. So because while instructional coaches in the building have coaching backgrounds. Some of these ML participants are teachers and they don't have a coaching background. So it's like, I either get a coach that doesn't know EL or I get an ML participant that doesn't know coaching. So what we've done is we've created a coaching cohort, and they are learning how to coach in the program. So that's what we've done with that. Right now I think I've got 6 coaches district-wide, in addition to my regular instructional coaches. So now I'm at like 11 coaches.
Oh, thank you so much. That is a great idea.
I guess I just need to look for funding for those people. Thanks.
Well, you can talk offline to Melinda and Ellie, because if they do it and their districts are smaller than yours, then you probably can do it. And I've met with Ogden's instructional coaches, and they're some of the most amazing people I've ever met. So anyway, so thanks, Melinda and Ellie. And now we're going to go to Randy from Washington, and he's going to tell us just briefly how exciting we were to interact with the Paiute tribe. Take it away, Randy. So nice to see you and Mike. Hi, guys.
Hello. Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Estrada. Washington County School District, within our boundaries, has one of the 5 bands of the Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah, which is the Shivwits Band. And we've been working with that particular band separate from the tribe as a whole for about 8 years, trying to work with language revitalization. Currently, there are less than 10 speakers of the Southern Paiute language within the 5 bands. And we've been working with them, trying to get language revitalization happening. We were holding classes at the elementary school for a while. We held classes and are holding classes out at the reservation currently. We created several resources over the years, thanks to the help of our friends over in San Juan, gave us some of the pictures, but we were able to get one of the speakers to give us the vocabulary words. We were able to publish those. Send some sentence phrases. But what we found was that we were failing because the district was owning the program, not the tribe or the band. And so we started with our Title VI collaboration. We would go up to Cedar City and work with tribal leaders. And every year we would bring up this language revitalization topic, and they would just kind of give us the yeah kind of answer. So over the last couple of years, we kept expressing, we as a district cannot own this. You as a tribe, it's your language, it's your heritage. You have to own this. And we were trying to fund it off of basically about $2,500 a year. We were trying to save this language. When Dr. Estrada came to Washington District last spring for our program review, we expressed to her our program, what we've been doing out there, and expressed some of our limitations with monetary issues and support from the tribe. And Dr. Estrada worked with us, and we collaborated together, saying, let's get a meeting with tribal leaders and see if we can get some movement with this, having the tribe as the owner of this language revitalization. So Dr. Estrada came to Cedar City. We went to tribal headquarters, Washington County School District, the Paiute Indian Tribe of Utah, and the Utah State Board with Dr. Estrada as that representative, and had a sit down and asked tribal leaders, their business administrators, and their educational specialists what their goals were on realizing this is going to be a problem really quick when there's less than 10 speakers. We've got to have something. And they agreed, and they were very excited about the potential. Dr. Estrada was able to help us reserve some funding to help fund their initiative. We did ask the tribe to take ownership and create a formal plan that didn't just benefit the Shivwits tribe, but it benefited all 5 bands within the state of Utah, which was huge for them because they kept going, yeah, Washington District does this down in St. George, but it didn't affect anything in Iron or Millard or Sevier District, right? And so they realized, we can do this and help all 5 bands throughout the state, and they were ecstatic. And so we asked them to create a plan, and which they have recently submitted a plan. They actually had to make some personnel changes to make this happen, which is probably a good thing. And so they are in the process now of getting some people in the right places with vision and trying to put the speed into this, realizing they're under a very short time frame because most of these elders that are speaking the language are in their 70s and 80s and don't have much time left. And so they're being intentional about getting some stuff going and making sure there's records and not relying on a school district to do this. We are supporting them and making sure, kind of helping them along this process. But the tribe has finally seen the vision of what is going to be needed to save their language, not my language, not Mike's language, but it's their language and their culture. And it's been a hard sell, but they've come to the realization they have to do it. And that's been exciting for them to see the light and them moving forward. And we're excited to see where this takes us.
So thanks, Randy and Mike. It's nice to see both of you. Two of my best friends down in southern Utah. And, you know, on my deathbed, one of the things that'll make me the happiest is that we finally got the Paiute languages and the Paiute tribe committed to sustaining their language. So I just want to thank you for working with me, Randy and Mike. I really appreciate that.
Been a pleasure.
Okay, so Stephanie is going to tell us a little bit about the revitalization of Go Shoot. And this is, I think, your second year, your third year, I can't remember.
You know, it started 3 years ago, but this is our second year of implementation of the actual teaching Go Shoot language instruction. So if you're okay with that, I'm going to share a screen. I don't have a long presentation or anything. I just want to make sure that you can see. I wanted to introduce our Go Shoot teacher, Virgil Johnson. So I don't know if any of you have seen or heard of Virgil, but Virgil is funny. He's a wonderful man, and you cannot stop this man. I mean, he has more energy than I have. So we're really lucky to have him as a Go Shoot teacher. But to backtrack a bit, 3 years ago, the Go Shoot tribe we have two bands of Go Shoot. So we have the Skull Valley Go Shoot band within our district boundaries, and then we have the Confederated Tribe of Go Shoot Reservation. They had brought up some concerns with USBE. In the past, there had been some form of Go Shoot instruction, but it was very small. And they brought some concerns to the district as well as the state saying, hey, we really would like to bring in Go Shoot instruction within the district. And I had just gotten into this position, so it was the perfect timing for me to learn and experience this journey. And we started working on the state level. So I wanted to show you this for the preservation of Utah Native languages. And it was an amazing process where I worked with Carl Bowman with World Languages at USBE, Dr. Foster, some tribal representatives. We even had representatives from University of Utah. So we just had people who were very invested in bringing about a partnership with the tribe and with our district to be able to bring and preserve the heritage language that is also very noticeably notice that the students are not speaking their native language. And yeah, same thing is happening, that the speakers are elderly. And so this project we worked on, I helped do more of the editing, but this can be shared out. I don't know, Dr. Estrada, if you have this document, but it describes out the effort and the need for our state for any of the federally recognized tribes here in Utah to be able to license. So right here is the gist of what we worked on, was to license any speaker that the tribe approved of for the district to be able to license a speaker to teach on a teacher salary, basically. And so when our state superintendent did sign this at the end of this process, which really opened the doors for us to be able to move forward with our Go Shoot language instruction. And about this time, so this would be last year when we found Virgil, and you can read some information about him. He's a pretty impressive man. And when he heard about this, he has expressed multiple times that all the things that he's done in his life, and you can see that he's done a lot, especially in the world of education. This is his ultimate goal and dream, and in providing and preserving and saving his culture, language, and so this being able to teach is his ultimate desire. And so we have a great partnership with him. He actually lives in Sandy. So we had to figure out how to do virtual because none of the speakers there wanted to be able to teach. And so, because that's quite the commitment. Plus with Go Shoot, it's an offset of Shoshone language. And so it's not a written language per se. And there's no curriculum either. And so with Virgil's education and administration background, he knows how to develop curriculum. He understands instruction, tier 1 instruction, the importance of repeating and guided practice, and so this is about the time frame we did start doing the online instruction for the Go Shoot students at K through 6 in Ivapaw Elementary, which is a really small school, and it's about almost 3 hours from district office. And so it's way out in rural Ivapaw. And it was about this time last year that I did not know how we were going to continue the funding because it was so limited. And that's when Dr. Estrada came into the picture. I can't remember if you just sent me a text and just said, hey, you want some money to fund this program that she had heard that we were doing. And so it was such a surprise, and it was just such a welcomed situation for us, because that opened the doors for us to pay more for Virgil and more time to create curriculum, lessons, experiential type lessons, and for him to be able to to go to the Shoshone tribe out in Pocatello, Idaho, to learn about their language instruction and what they do, and get ideas and types of lessons. And he came back super excited. And so we used the money to build that curriculum. And this year we are going to be opening up online a course, 7th through 12th grade, Go Shoot language instruction, and they would be able to receive course credit. We were hoping to start at the beginning of this school year, but there's a lot of little pieces that have to go into play, and working within our teaching and learning department. But I do want to say that the tribe has been an integral part of this process, and that we have built a relationship so that it is working together in this whole entire project of preserving Go Shoot language and supporting their students. And so I'm just trying to think if I think that's mainly where we're at. I'm really appreciative for some ongoing funding and looking for other resources to keep this going. But it's been exciting, and it's been a lot of work, and it's been worthwhile.
So thanks, Stephanie. It seems like I should, since Virgil is close, I should meet him. You know, my dad was a Marine, but it was in World War II. So he seems like a kind of a soul spirit that I'd like.
Exactly. Yes, he is. He's neat.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I want to say is the state activities is a certain amount of money in the Title III, and the emphasis on maintaining a heritage language and the districts that are actually supporting that is the way that we use the state activities fund to revitalize languages and other really innovative approaches to, what districts are doing. So that's the other piece. So thanks, Stephanie. And we're going to go to Trevor and Brenda, and they're going to talk a little bit about revitalization of Navajo. And they've led the way, and they've actually supported, I think, the Ute tribe as well.
Yeah, so we've been able to work with the Navajo Nation on the Navajo language, but we've also been working with our Southern Paiute here. We do have some Southern Paiute here in the San Juan School District and the Ute Mountain Ute tribe, and they are a little bit further behind, but we're using the same strategy to work with the tribes to get those programs up and running. Brenda's has been amazing to work with and is going to share a little bit about some of our program, and there's a lot here, so she's going to kind of give a brief overview, and then you can feel free to ask questions. We're very similar in using some help from Dr. Estrada to help us, but we've also been really proactive in going after funding for this through the Office of Indian Education, and we've been able to stack several grants that we've been able to have provide support. So Brenda, with that, we'll turn the time over to you to share some on our biliteracy seal and what we're doing.
Okay, yat she Brenda Whitehorse and she had saw it in the Inchle. It's in the Jenny Bush's chain, Cochini the Shichedo, Kiani the Chanel. I would like to greet everyone in my own language and welcome you to our presentation. It was really exciting to actually put this together because we are doing a lot of great things in San Juan School District. And one of the things that we really tackled this year was really thinking about our developing our own Utah seal of biliteracy for our San Juan School District. And the reason why that was important to us was just to support, it was part of language revitalization, but it was also to support students in terms of allowing them to access material and resources that they can start like at an earlier age. So this is our Utah Seal of Biliteracy logo that we just got developed for us, and we really do like it. It has our 4 sacred mountains. It also has our Native youth. So we have a Navajo girl, a Ute girl, and then we have the cornstalk, which pretty much represents the growth that students go through in terms of, infancy all the way into childhood, into adulthood, and all that they learn. And then, of course, we have our arrowheads around our seal that protects our students from anything that's harmful to them. And so this is one of the things that we're doing is developing a San Juan School District Native Navajo Youth Biliteracy independent course using Canvas. And so students that are 8th through 12th grade can sign up to take this independent course. They can start as early as 8th grade. And it prepares them for the Utah Seal of Biliteracy test for our district. And then this is the flyer that we put on our heritage language page so students can sign up and start working on the independent course. We're also encouraging students to take Navajo 1, Navajo 2, Navajo government, and Navajo classes in secondary schools. We do realize that our schools do offer a lot of other courses in secondary schools, so we're encouraging students to take all their Navajo classes in grades 9 and 10 so that they can have the opportunity to take the Navajo government class when they're like in 11th grade and be able to apply for the Chief Manuelito Scholarship. And then one of the other things that we were really excited about, of course, was the change in terms of how the state of Utah looks at the WIDA assessment for students to achieve, to be exited and achieve the seal of biliteracy for English. But we're also including that for native languages. So this is what we're using. So students who score an intermediate mid score with the Navajo Nation or Ute tribal language tests can be able to get their Utah Seal of Biliteracy on their diploma. And then we also incorporated the other measures that were given to us by the state of Utah. And then one of the other things that I want to show you before, because there's a lot I actually planned this presentation longer than 10 minutes, and I know I only have 10 minutes, so I have to make it quick. But this is what our Utah Bilingual Still Independent course looks like. We have instructional videos. We have modules for students. So our first one is this module, and it's called Dinejitli Bahanem. So students will be able to get into this module. They'll be able to learn about Nayet Nizgane, also known as the Monster Slayer, is a warrior deity who protects the Navajo people from evil spirits and negative influences. And then Twabashish Chin, also known as Child Born for Water, and is a healer deity. He is a protector of his brother. So there's this stories, all of the stories that we have in our tradition and ceremonial stories come from storytelling. So like all of our elders, and so they pass down these stories throughout the years. And so each family has their own version of these stories, and they're very similar, but they might have like their own way of telling it. And so when they share their culture and their stories, they say, this was told to me by my grandfather. Your story might be told to you a little differently, but in terms of the concepts and everything, those are the same. So these are like what the students will be learning. They'll be learning the 4 sacred directions, the names of the mountains for those 4 sacred directions, and then how that ties into the story of the horse. And then they'll be able to watch instructional videos, and I'll play one for you. All of our instructional videos are in Navajo, and that's so that students can hear the language, and then they can produce that language, and they can know how those words are pronounced. And we're also incorporating a lot of like our traditional teachings and stories that students who may not come from like a traditional home can still have access to a lot of these stories. So in this first module, Ty actually shares a horse song with students that students can learn how to sing as part of this module. And I'll play a little bit of that for you. So within this horse song, it's all of the vocabulary that the students are going to be learning that's presented here. So they'll have ample opportunities to learn the language. And then in the Canvas course, they're also recorded so they can hear the vocabulary words several times. And we have 6 instructional videos. We're adding on to our video collection. So this is the teachings of the horse. The next video series that we're actually working on is on which is kinship. And so there'll be another series of modules that students would be able to take. And then the videos after kinship would be based on traditional foods. So we're just building on to, I guess, our resources that we already have. And we're doing that with the work of getting feedback from our teachers through PLC. So our teachers that teach the heritage language, we have 8 teachers that teach heritage language across our schools in San Juan School District. And we are incorporating PLCs for elementary and secondary. And then we are looking at how to design our assessments based on what our focus is for our programs. And then I'm just going to show you quick snapshots of what that would look like across our schools. So we just celebrated our 30th Heritage Language Conference for San Juan School District, and it was an awesome event. And some of the things that we really focus on is our language, and we think that the language is the roadmap of culture. It tells you where its people come from and where they are going. And then these are our heritage language teachers. So during the summertime, we work on the curriculum, we work on pacing guides, we discuss what types of things we would like to see in our heritage language classes and how we can really focus on getting our students to really invest in language revitalization, but also learn about their rich heritage and culture and history of their people. So a lot of the teachers that we have, they bring in their own, they share their own rich heritage and life experiences and share their culture based on what they've learned from their elders, which makes the learning fun and very meaningful. And then this is Blanding Elementary. So we do have a knowledge bowl and a language fair, and I'm just going to play a quick video so you can see what that looks like. Let me see if I can minimize this a little bit. So there's some dancing, there's also some singing.
Brenda, we can't really hear them.
Oh, okay. So while they're singing in their own Navajo language, and then having them sing is also a way that they acquire language. And so we use that in helping students to acquire language. And I'm sorry, the sound is not as great as I want it to be.
That's okay.
So each teacher pretty much put their slides together of how they work with students. So this year we had Bluff Elementary and Blanding Elementary students attend the bear dance. And it was such a great thing. It's part of the Ute heritage in our school district. And so students were able to learn about that and were able to participate. And I don't know what the sound would be like for this video, but I just kind of want you to show you what the bear dance looks like and how our students were participating. And what was really neat about all of the students participating in the bear dance is that they were able to work with the White Mesa elders and sewing the ribbon skirts, the shawls for the bear dance, the ribbon shirts that students wore. And so it was a huge community event. And the bear dance chief, Jack Cansey Jr., was also a presenter at our conference. And he shared a lot of knowledge about the Ute history and Ute culture with the students. And a lot of our native students and non-native students really benefit from all of that. And so I'm just going to quickly go through this. I don't know how much time I have left, but these are some of the things that we do across our district. So we have Mabel Martin here, who's a Navajo language teacher at Montezuma Creek Elementary. And one of the things that we focus on in our professional learning is looking at those multilingual strategies, the SIOP strategies, and how they can incorporate that with language teaching into their heritage language classes. And this is kind of what that looks like. And they use a lot of visuals, a lot of games. Some of these resources come directly from our Heritage Language Resource Center. Some of them teachers have created, and those are used throughout our school. As you can see here, these are just some examples of what that looks like. A lot of visual charts, that's how students connect. And then also within some of our other schools for secondary, we have our heritage language student representation in terms of our school princess and prince pageant, and how they have to incorporate language into that program and representing the school. And so it really connects everything together very nicely. And then there's also a lot of additional school activities that happen per school during Heritage Language Month, or even across the school year. You know, like we have winter stories, we have coyote stories that are being shared in the winter time. We learn about constellations. In the springtime, we learn about, you know, like the animals. That's when we tell horse stories about herding the sheep. And then during the summer, we talk about planting the corn, and then also the fall harvest. So like our curriculum is really has really come together. We've created our own pacing guides. We've created our own lessons. And in addressing, you know, we've had some teachers, heritage language teachers, that have retired. And so one of the things that we're doing is growing our own teachers. And so I look at potential teachers that could possibly teach the language. And the teacher for San Juan High and Alba Lyman is a good representation of that. Her name is Valina Cody. And so she had strong enough oral language skills in Navajo. With a lot of mentoring and support, she became a heritage language teacher and is doing really well in those two schools. And that was the classroom that you visited, Dr. Estrada. So and that just goes to show that you can grow your own.
Yeah. So Brenda, so what I'm going to suggest is that you send this presentation to me, and I'll send it out to everybody, so they can have the benefit of everything that you have actually developed. And I think it was Bluff Elementary that I went to, where I saw a student, actually a Japanese student. She was, her family's Japanese.
And actually their school princess is actually a Japanese student. And we tease about it because we're like, okay, she's actually really, I think she's in this picture right here.
She's trilingual. She's trilingual.
Yeah. And what's really fun about that is the history, you know, with the Navajo code talkers and everything. And the elders, they tease her and they say, now don't go back to Japan. and so like there's a lot of historical connections that come in with that when you're learning about the culture. But the other thing that I want to wrap this up with is just sharing that we do ongoing professional learning collaboration with our heritage language teachers. We bring in language consultants that are really, you know, knowledgeable about the language and the history and the culture. And then we incorporate that into our curriculum. And then we use best teaching practices into our lessons. And, you know, like some teachers are really like making those connections. We need a little bit more support for other teachers, but we're really coming along. And these are like the same principles that are, you know, that work for all multilingual learners in terms of the language that they're focusing on. So these are the language principles that we use. And then when we're designing activities, we focus on, okay, what's going to be our focus? Is it going to be academic language, literacy, or vocabulary? And then the teachers incorporate strategies to meet those needs based on SIOP lesson plans. And then also like the same thing for building background knowledge and culture to learning. There's a lot of work that has to be done before the teacher can actually teach the lesson. And a lot of that is building background. And if students are not raised in a traditional home, they may not have the background about the coyote stories and things like that. So, and then increase comprehensible input and language output. So this is like our main focus this year, is really on oral language development and getting our students to talk more, teachers to talk less, support more, getting that language out, and so that students can make meaning of it, which is the comprehensible output. And this is what it looks like. And so we're trying to make it very fun and engaging for students. And then this is what it looks like when students are learning vocabulary. Like this is like nana, which means again, bigidintihish. That means, do you understand? And then students can say bigidishti, and then pointing at something and then saying like, how do you say this in Navajo? So like we even created like sentence question starters and sentence stems in Navajo that we use with our TPRS. And then these are what the lessons the teachers work on. This is what it looks like. Navajo Nation is kind of further ahead than a lot of tribes. And when we do our tribal consultation, they really are very vocal and they tell us what they want to see. And they make sure that we do it. And so one of the things that they have is they have the standards through Navajo Nation Department of Education all written out. And so they tell us exactly what they want us to teach for Navajo language instruction. And so this is one of the standards. So what that means is that students will have an understanding, like if they have, like what the turquoise means to students in terms of the culture. And so and then they have to go to a go-to strategy. So like if they're developing an activity for this, the activity might be stimulate higher order thinking. It's an 8th grade Navajo class lesson. And then what can the students do? They can work in pairs.
So Brenda, I'm going to have you just summarize just briefly because we have someone else coming on.
Oh, okay. So pretty much that's all I want to share, but it's ongoing work, and I'll give the time over to Trevor to see if he wants to share anything else, and then we're done.
Thanks, Brenda.
Yeah, I think we're good. Thank you for your help and support. And we appreciate everybody on these calls. They've really reached out. We love working with everybody and collaborating. And so we appreciate all your support on this, and back to you.
Thanks. So the work that San Juan has done with also with Ute, is a good model for the work that we're doing with Go Shoot and Paiute. And so I think it's a great example of having people who are kind of on the cutting edge and doing really amazing things. So I just want to thank you. I wished I lived closer so I could just hang out with you all in all the celebrations that you do. I spent time on the Navajo reservation. That's my dog protecting me. So anyway, so I do have some experiences, with families and communities, actually in Shiprock, and that really changed my life and made a big difference in my life. So I have a huge commitment to the revitalization of indigenous languages. So I just want to thank you so much. And I'm not sure if Lisa is still on. Is Lisa still here? She's a teacher, and she was going to pop in and tell us a little bit about her experience with the Preventing Bullying course. But I actually don't see her. So I'll just, so Brenda's saying we have our San Juan Heritage Language Conference online on the Title VI website. I'll also be, sending out all this, all the resources that we have seen in what people have shared. And I think Lisa is actually in Granite. There have been several teachers and administrators. It's a self-paced online course in our Title III catalog, and it's about preventing bullying and looking at it from the research of a public health issue. and the impact that bullying has on the community, which includes the person who is bullied, the person who's doing the bullying, and the bystanders. And so I really recommend the course. It's, on Canvas, you go to Title III Professional Learning, and the work that teachers have done over the last summer and in the fall have been amazing, has changed the way in which they think about bullying and the public health costs and the impact it has on, each student, the community, and the family. If there's nothing else, I just want to thank all of you for your participation, for your commitment, for your love and passion for the work that you do. So I'm signing off officially now, but I'll stay on if there's anybody who has anything that they want to say, and I'll be on for until noon, which is, we're finishing at 11:30. But I'm just going to sign off and thank you. And the people who have presented, they'll send all their materials and their PowerPoints to me, and then I'll send them out to the entire ALS group, which includes teachers and many other people. So thanks, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.